I'm sitting here with my colleague and co-author and a really beautiful person. She has been a huge help in my personal and academic journey during my postdoc. Basically, my papers wouldn't happen if you and Rosa Cheeseman didn't exist. And you just opened a new door to my world as a social psychologist, because there's so many social psychologists that they never talk about the G word. But just like meeting you guys and getting to know the whole genetic and behavioral genetic and this, how do you say it? Genetic psychiatry? Is that how you say it? Yeah. This new phrase even, and all those concepts behind it, for me, it was just a new world. And I think I've been blessed to have you as my co-author. And I've been blessed by comments from you that made me do my analysis again. Ooh. And again and again from the beginning. So I have hated you in my heart sometimes, but then after I see the result, I'm like, okay, I can see why. So yes, I'm sitting here with Dr. Ziada Ayurech.
Yeah.
Is that how you say it?
Yeah, Ayurech.
Ayurech. I said it in a very German way.
I like it. It sounded nice.
Yeah, okay, I'm sitting here with Dr. Ziada Ayurech, and we both work at Promentor Research Center at the University of Oslo.
We do.
We both are not Norwegians.
That's very much true.
But we're staying here, but still strong. Yeah.
Somehow.
And we have somewhat different backgrounds. You have a PhD in behavioral genetics. And really, really interesting master's and bachelor's period in your life. Like this girl going everywhere, finding, what do I want to do? Maybe you can tell us a little bit about it.
I'd love to. I would circle back though to the point of, getting to be co-authors together. I think so many of us who trained within genetics have really wanted to see these methods used by people who have a different background in terms of research. I think, your kind of area of interest and the questions you ask are different, and that is so beneficial for the field of behavioral genetics or psychiatric genetics. And so it's also been really wonderful, and we've learned a lot in working with you too.
Definitely. I can't think of anything that you learned, but okay.
But it has to be a two-way transfer. So yeah, as you said, it's been this windy road to the field of psychiatric genetics that I work in now in Promenta. And I guess we can go back to, when, I was born in Uganda and my family moved to Canada when I was very young, to this very small town that I still can't believe we live there, but we do. And yeah, I think from when I was young, I always was really interested in, something that involved people. I was always really social, and I moved to Montreal. That's the first place where I did my kind of bachelor's degree, and that was in clinical neuroscience. So I worked in a lab where we were really interested in kind of the impacts of kind of stress and that, and it was really based on kind of like substance abuse and these kind of models. But I was always really intrigued by mental health, and I felt like stress was really important. So I was coming up with these kind of questions and ideas around stress and the impact on how we learn and how we feel. But these approaches, I was working within kind of a lab that worked in animal models, and it just, I wasn't convinced about some of the ways that we can model kind of mental health and the complex ways that people experience mental health problems. And I wanted to go and kind of do research with people. So that's why I moved to the UK. So yeah, it was in London that I did my master's, which that was in more, it was clinical neuroscience, but it was more in psychopharmacology. So what that means is I was kind of interested in what medicine people are given sometimes when they have mental health problems. How does that medicine work? Why does it help people? But also, why do we see some of these side effects? I think often when you experience a medication and you receive these kind of side effects, it can feel very random as to why do I have this side effect? Why is this happening? It's supposed to help this kind of thing. But there's a lot that we can understand about what's happening in the brain, and a lot of the side effects really make sense when you understand what's happening in the brain.
And these side effects could be unique to people as well, right?
Completely. It's so complicated. Yeah, and such a, yeah, so I became very interested in that. And then just by chance ended up in behavioral genetics. So that's its own story.
At King's College.
Yeah, exactly. So
just circling back to your animal studies, I mean, it was a bachelor's, but I mean, you would probably be able to answer me now. So what happens in animal studies is that mostly when it comes to the genetic manipulation, it's mostly like single gene manipulation when it comes to animal studies, right?
Completely.
So maybe that's one of the reasons why we cannot apply it to even more now, given this new phenomenon of polygeneity of.
Completely. I think that's such a relevant point. You know, I think animal models in general, or any kind of models of human behavior must be simplified, right? Because that's the only way we can kind of control all of the factors, so we can see, oh, when I do this, what is the outcome? And that means that we can have, as you say, you know, for example, maybe there's these knockout studies. So what that means is maybe you stop a particular gene from working and you see, what is the impact if that gene is not there? And that's a great way for us to understand a single gene. But all of these complex behaviors that we're interested in, especially mental health, these are not single gene disorders. These are mental health problems that arise from hundreds and thousands of genes and environments. So yeah, the models are just often too simplified, for the complex way that we just experience life. Yeah.
Interesting. The reason why I was very insisting to have you as my first guest is your background. In your research background, you have a part where you have worked immensely on maternal well-being, honestly, and also maternal postpartum depression. I have a friend. She had a baby 2 years ago. She goes to her general physician and she says, I cannot sleep and I'm having thoughts of death and suicide. And I'm freaking out. It's 1 month after the baby was born. So for 1 month she was okay-ish, and then she was not sleeping at all. And at some point she was just thinking suicidal thoughts. And she goes to the doctor and she says, how I feel? And the doctor is like, it's just baby blues. Is that what you say? Baby blue? Yeah. Just go home and rest. 2 days after, she was in a psychiatric section of the hospital, hospitalized with a little bit of psychosis. So it has been a long journey for her. It has been heartbreaking to even think about it. And how underestimated this postpartum depression is still. It's just, honestly, for me as a clinical psychologist, it's so funny that a doctor would say it's baby blues, go home. This is why I really wanted to talk about this phenomenon with you, especially because you have a more systematic overview over it because of your background in genetics and both taking into account the environment and the whole family dynamic. What happens? Where does it come from? Like before the pregnancy, the prenatal period? Can you tell us a little bit about the story of?
It's such a profound story you've talked about this experience of your friend. And I think, I wish that this was this isolated circumstance. And it's, I think what is really heartbreaking for those of us who are so passionate about mental health is that this is often that this can be the case, that it takes so much to go and seek help and say, I'm struggling. And I think when that is met with some kind of minimizing or someone saying, this will pass, I think that is really dangerous. So I'm so sorry to hear about this experience from your friend. So you're right, maternal depression and maternal health is a huge area of interest for me, and it wasn't before. So I think if we go back, I finished, when I was in London, I was doing my PhD, And in the first year of my PhD, I got pregnant with my firstborn. And this was a huge chapter for me because, I was in a different country. I didn't have family around. I was starting this PhD, but I knew that I wanted to be a mother. And I knew that, I think we can't control the timings of things. And I was like, okay, let's try this time. And it was
let's try being a mother. It's irreversible.
And what a busy process that was. I was very fortunate to have a partner who was there and who was able to support me. But I remember, I have this photo that I always look back on, and my son was born 10 days before my birthday. And on my birthday, I really wanted to be together with my friends. And so I organized, to bring this little 10-day-old baby with me to have a birthday with all of my friends. And there's this photo of me, and I'm smiling and I'm holding him. But my partner and my mother were there, and they knew that it took me hours to decide what I could put on my body because I didn't feel like myself. I was in tears because I wanted to go out. I was nervous about breastfeeding in public. I was nervous about what happens if baby cries. I was so anxious about this experience, but also really wanted to feel like myself and go out. And in this photo, I'm smiling with my son, but I had all of these things happening. And I think for me, that was the beginning of realizing, we have to be really careful when we ask or speak to parents after a new baby has arrived. I think we focus so much on the children. How's baby? Is baby eating? How is the process? Is baby sleeping? Baby's going to be okay. I think we need to talk to the parents, and often we really need to talk to the mothers and ask them, how are you doing? What can I do for you? How can I take some of this work? Do you need support? What are you feeling? So, at this time I started speaking to a lot of mothers about their experiences, and many really opened up about feeling profoundly low, after a baby was born. Maybe this real intense anxiety and this overwhelming feeling of just, I'm this whole person that is supposed to take care of this new baby, but I feel so overwhelmed and lonely in that process. And so that started me thinking about maternal health. I trained in genetics, so I really wanted to bring that to the question, because a lot of the times people talk about how mothers are doing, but they talk about it purely from an environmental perspective. And that misses the point, because genetics is kind of our starting point. It's not our destiny, but it lets us know kind of how sensitive, for example, are we to environments? What is our kind of baseline risk for mental health problems? And then the environments we experience can kind of dampen or increase these risks. So I think when we're asking about mental health, we need to consider genetics. Yeah.
Okay, but when it comes to maternal postpartum depression, is it there's some single genes, specific genes? Is it the same? Are the same genes that are involved in depression, moderate depression, major depression, are the same polygenic scores that you think about when you think about maternal postpartum depression?
Yeah, I think to kind of understand what's happening with maternal depression and genetics, we could almost take a step back and just ask about mental health and genetics. So I think for a long time we thought that people get unwell because of maybe things that they've experienced in their environment. We used to think that various mental health disorders were purely environmental. So that meant, did you have this warm parent when you were growing up, or did you not? Or did you experience this or that? And we really understood mental health purely environmentally. And that's quite a dangerous approach, I think, because that often led to a lot of blaming. Mothers were often the blame for, if you had a child who has a mental health problem, it's because you weren't a warm enough mother, or you weren't present enough or emotionally available. And now, with decades of research within the field of genetics, we understand that all mental health disorders, not just maternal depression, not just schizophrenia, not just anxiety disorders, all mental health disorders are in part influenced by our genes. And that varies. How genetic they are varies across disorders, but for most depression, it's around 30 to 40% how genetically influenced that is. Maternal depression is a little bit more genetic than depression in itself. I think that there's kind of an acute experience of mental health problems that happens after having a baby, and normally we talk about this kind of 6-month period. So the experience of profound mental health problems within that 6 months, that could be what we consider postpartum depression, for example.
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but giving birth is a traumatic event.
Yeah,
changes the brain, changes
Absolutely.
the body, and it's a trauma.
Completely.
Like, I mean, it's not an adverse event, could be positive event, but it's a trauma.
Absolutely.
Talking about going back to my friend, her whole life she was not diagnosed with any mental health problems, and after giving birth, she has been screened for bipolar, for depression, even for schizophrenia. So it was a complex issue going on after this birth.
Completely. It's so true what you say. It's a trauma, and no matter what the experience was, like, it is even just hormonally what happens to a person's body when they get pregnant and prepare for birth, like that is a humongous shift. And if we look at people's lives, not just when they're pregnant, but we look at kind of key hormonal periods in our lives. So when we go through puberty, when we get pregnant, and then later, if you go through menopause, we see that these are these periods where there's this heightened risk of mental health problems. And it's because, as you say, these are big kind of traumas on the body. Absolutely. So I think it makes sense to be aware that this is a potential risk period for people's lives, and support is really necessary there. In terms of my understanding of maternal depression, I think what is really unique about the way that I do that research is that I think a lot of times we focus on just the person who has or has experienced mental health problems, but we are not single individuals. We live, humans, we're so social, right? We have people around us. This could be friends, this could be other children maybe, this could be partners. And so I really also try to think about how the people around whoever has experienced mental health problems can also influence experiences of getting better or maybe, feeling worse.
Circling back to what you said about maternal postpartum depression could be more genetic than depression. Can you elaborate a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the mental health experiences around that period of time of having a baby and 6 months after, you spoke about your friend who didn't have any mental health problems until she got pregnant, until after this baby was born. You can experience, this profound mental depression, but also, experiences of psychosis and, hallucinations, and just this real disconnect with your reality can happen at that point. And I think it is often the case that when we have these kind of acute periods, that also suggests that there's a lot happening at a genetic level. So there's some ways that we can study, to what extent the same genes are influencing one disorder and the other. And we see that there's some overlap between depression and psychosis that happens to women postpartum and regular depression, but there's also some unique genes that are influencing and some correlations with other kind of psychotic disorders. And I think this is why there's kind of a boost in genetic effects at that particular time.
I have to found some genes that suddenly start methylation and activate after giving birth? Or?
I think that no. So there's no kind of evidence of that necessarily right now. But I think, as we know within research in genetics and kind of mental health, that nothing is just genetic, right? Yeah. It's also environmental, and I think the environments that we experience when we are giving birth or when we're pregnant are quite unique in themselves, and that can be a time that can kind of amplify people's genetic risk. You said it was a trauma. We know that people who have a history of trauma and also have, a risk of mental health problems are more likely to experience an episode. So I think if you have this kind of liability or this risk for mental health problems, and you had an experience in environments that brought those out, this trauma of birth and pregnancy and this hormonal shift can be the time that kind of brings out that vulnerability.
Oh.
Yeah.
Can postpartum depression also run in the family? Because we said it could be, there is genetic involved. So there is when we talk about genetic, we also talk about heritability, right?
Yeah,
so
yeah.
Do you have any evidence?
Absolutely. I think this idea of something running in the family is so powerful, because I think this can be, this kind of early sign that we should keep a lookout, because when we say something is genetic, what we really mean by that is it means that it runs in families. So people who are more genetically similar will have, similarities in their kind of risk, let's say.
But then again, it doesn't mean I'm like, if there's depression in my family, then it's not determined that I'm going to be depressed.
Absolutely.
Just because, yeah.
Absolutely. And that's so important.
You put me in an environment where it's optimal for my mental health, and that those genes may never be activated, right?
Completely. And I think it's also important to know everybody has these genes. So I think sometimes we think, oh, do we have depression genes or do we not? It's not this have or not. It's this kind of, do you have many or do you have fewer? And people who have many maybe have, at a genetic level, a higher risk. That does not mean that they're going to go and have depression. You can have a family history of mental health problems. That doesn't mean that you're going to have mental health problems. Yeah. But what it can mean is it can mean that you can be more aware that, what are the kind of factors that influence mental health risk that I might have? So for example, a great one that I think about is with bipolar disorder. Mm-hmm. So, if you have a family history of bipolar disorder, which is just to be sure we know what we're talking, bipolar disorder is a mental health problem that has both the experiences of depression, but also has these experiences of mania, which is this elevated, agitated, increased state where, you have difficulty sleeping, you're maybe engaging in risky behavior. And having a family history of bipolar disorder can be helpful for you as a person who knows that, because people with bipolar disorder are more sensitive to changes in their sleep. So that means if you know that, this is my kind of family history, then you can be more vigilant about, I really need to stick to a good sleep schedule. I need to take care of, what my sleep routine is and these things. It isn't to say that if you don't do that, you're going to suddenly develop this disorder. It just means, everybody should sleep better. Everybody should have more exercise. Everybody should eat well. But maybe some people, that sleeping better and having more exercise and eating well is particularly important. Yeah. And so this question about whether or not, postpartum depression can run in families, it can, for this very same reason that all mental health disorders, can run in families. I think that this also means that, if you have a family history of somebody in your family who experienced postpartum depression, that you also then, would really want to have extra support during pregnancy and after the child is born, and also have somebody near you who can who knows how you normally are. I think it is normal to have a baby and feel overwhelmed. It is normal to have a baby and feel more anxious and want to be sure that everything's okay. But once that gets to a point that it's impacting your life, that you can't do the things that you would regularly do, someone near you can maybe realize that, Roz is not leaving the house as much as she used to. She's not taking care of the things that she normally would do, So I think, that family history can be really helpful knowledge.
I really like how you take this genetic component and then turn the table in a way that, but listen, if the environment is an optimal environment, that's basically, correct me if I'm wrong, that's basically what you're saying, that if the let's say you have all these genetic predispositions, but if the environment is an optimal environment, then we can make sure actually that this is not going to happen, the bipolar or the depression, or so. That has a really relaxing effect in a way to know that, oh, it's not a determined phenomenon that, okay, that's it, it's going to happen. So I was thinking about two things. First is that I'm just doing some random weird blood tests, and they did this pharmacogenetics analysis, and they found that I have this 5-HTTP gene that we talk about. If you have the long genetic variant, then you are less predisposed to develop depression and anxiety. I mean, me and you don't look at this phenomenon in a single gene perspective, but there are studies showing that 5-HTTP gene, if you have the long variant, then you're less prone to developing depression and anxiety. And if you have the short variant, then you're more prone to... It's so funny. I have both of them.
Okay.
I have one long one and I have short one.
Yeah.
So it was so funny for me. I was like, look, you can choose.
Yeah.
You can choose which one you want to have more activated.
Okay.
So if I put myself in an environment where I'm careful about my mental health and what I'm exposing myself to, then I can make sure that the long one is being more active than the short one. I mean, it's just simplifying, but it made me think about that. Also, when we talk about having these genetic predispositions, we know that this, taking into account that psychiatric problems and psychological problems are also, there are so many genes involved, genetic variants involved in these problems, because before, like 20 years ago, we were most focused on physiological problems and diseases and their genetic components, like breast cancer, for example. And there was a wave after Angelina Jolie's double mastectomy, is that called mastectomy? That people were screening themselves to see if they have this genetic variant and genetic mutation to make sure that they can prevent. So that's basically what you're saying, that we can prevent those genetic mutations to be active all the time if we take care of, I mean, in the physiological senses. And when it comes to breast cancer, you have to take care of what you eat and, your physiological hygiene and also mental health hygiene to make sure that you're decreasing the risk of this breast cancer, or just go with full-blown prevention doing this double mastectomy. So the same thing applies to psychological problems, that okay, you have the genetic predisposition, you don't have when it comes to psychological problems, it's not possible to do a double mastectomy to remove those possibilities, but it is possible to make sure that you're in an environment that it could be working for you in an optimal way, instead of worsening and increasing the chance of those genetic variants being active. Right?
Yeah, and I think that's a really nice distinction, between what we can do with these, kind of rare single gene disorders like this BRCA gene, which is what is related to Angelina Jolie, and this, really amazing preventative approach of getting a double vasectomy. And I think what the challenge sometimes is, which you've kind of mentioned within mental health research, is that we know about these kind of single gene disorders, and we sometimes get tempted to apply that same thought process to mental health disorders. But mental health disorders are they're not 100% genetic. I said that, the range is, around 50%. Some are more heritable or genetically influenced than others, but there's no mental health disorder that is 100% genetic. And that touches on what you're saying, that it isn't this, oh, I've got a family risk, so now I know I'm going to have a mental health problem. I have these risk genes, so it's certain that I'm going to have depression. And we can do things in our environment that dampens that risk, right? And I think it highlights this really important thing, that nothing in mental health is one or the other. It's always genetic and environmental, and they can work together. And we can't change our genes. We were born with our DNA, and that will stick for all of our lives. But what we can do is change and optimize our environments to help promote our mental health, and and also to look for kind of early signs, because I think sometimes what the challenge is as well is it takes a long time before people get the diagnosis and the support and maybe sometimes the medication that they need. And so understanding that we can be proactive ourselves, we can look out for signs, and we can take care of ourselves in our exercise, I think that gives us a lot more power too. Yeah.
Sometimes, so the more I get into this gene environment interaction and interplay, the more I understand the importance of taking a macro level look at any psychological problems and taking into account individual, family, society, even the regime and the governmental. So it is, for me, it's a little bit heartbreaking to think about it, because where I've come coming from Iran, and okay, let's say that I'm trying to take care of myself on an individual level, and I'm trying to make sure that me as an individual, along with my family, are going to have a family dynamic where it's going to help my mental health in a good way. But well, when we get out of the house and we are encountered all those stressors and the way everything is going on in my country, for example. So first, I want you to tell us how the child itself, after giving birth, and the father of the child or the partner can also affect maternal well-being and postpartum depression. And also, when we take it to a higher level, getting out of the house and workplace, school, all those other environments that we are exposed to every day. Do you have any suggestions how to make this whole scenery of daily life a better a help for
Completely. And I think this links back to what I said at the beginning, that you have taught us a lot of things as geneticists. And I think, you've tapped on something really important. And I think when we talk about or consider people's mental health, we can't do that in isolation, because we are not just individuals, we are members of family, we have extended family, and then, as you say, we go out into the world, and we often don't have much control as to what meets us when we reach those circumstances. What is the political climate, the actual climate? What are we exposed to when we go out? And I think it's really important to ask questions about mental health from all of these perspectives, because there's no solution that doesn't consider all of these. So taking it back to what you said about the family, I think, for so long, we didn't do this in mental health. We would focus predominantly on the person who's unwell. And we also thought that, if someone else is impacted, for example, if children are impacted by their mothers or parents' mental health, we really assumed that was going one way. The impact of having a parent who has depression really affects a child. We would only look in this one direction. And we now have, these kind of complex methods using DNA, where we can now ask the question, wait a minute, could it be that impact goes two ways? Is it possible that not only do, parents influence their children, but is it also possible that children influence their parents? And this is what we found, across multiple methods, is that the genes of those people around us influence the environment that we experience. So that can sound a bit complex. And I guess what I mean is that, I think when we think of environments, we often think about, okay, what's the building you're in? What are the walls you're in? What's the roof?
How could you affect that?
Yeah, how can you affect the walls? But our environment is also made up of people. Right? And these people have their own genes. We know some people are, more extroverted naturally. Some people are a little bit more sensitive to stress. We know these things. And this means that the environment, let's say, of a mother who's just given birth is influenced by, if there's a partner around, that partner's mental health, and also this little child that she's parenting. We know as let's say, people who've cared for children, that it's a little bit challenging to care for a child who's running around all the time, or is, always on the go, and so that those kind of qualities of the child are influenced in part by that child's genes. And it means that the environment of parenting for a child who's maybe a little colicky, so I mean like cries much more often, or is a bit more distressed or a bit more anxious or struggles to sleep a bit more, that will influence that mother's experience of parenting. I think one of the areas I'm really interested in is also what happens, where you have, for example, a two-parent household. So, if you're a mother and your partner is struggling themselves with mental health problems, that kind of impacts the amount of support that mother can have. I think when someone is struggling with their mental health, they're also trying to get better. They're also in the depths of it, and it's exhausting. It's exhausting, and it's really hard to care for somebody when you yourself need care. And that's a really untapped line of research, which I'm focusing on how partners' genes can influence, mother's experience of mental health problems. And then, as you said, we go out into the world, and I think we know that if I'm saying that the home environment is made up of people, what happens when you go to work? There's people at your workplace. The mental health.
Even more genes.
More genes. There's genes everywhere. You go to the workplace, and then you have your colleagues, and you have your supervisors, and you have these people who we interact with daily, and how they're doing influences how we're doing, and then again, we go to the larger scale of, society. And I think that becomes challenging because, there's so much happening in the world right now that is out of our control, and that cannot be just out there. That impacts us. Sometimes I think mental health problems can also be a very natural response to what is really unnatural that we're dealing with in the world. Yeah.
I mean, if you don't have these responses, that would be weird.
Absolutely.
Like that would make me think that we're all psychopaths.
Yeah. I mean, completely. I think, we're living in a time where we are more aware of what's happening everywhere than anywhere before. We have access to so much more visual and real life content that I think can definitely impact, especially those of us who are connected and, empathetic and concerned. Yeah.
Would it be weird if I ask, what should we do?
What should we do?
Okay, just again, I'm thinking about this example with my beautiful friend. She sometimes tells me that when she's in this depressive mood, she tells me, I wish I was not feeling like this so I could enjoy my baby playing around in the apartment.
Yeah.
Or I wish I was not feeling like this so I also had the energy to engage with her. And then she goes to work, and she works in a branch where it's male dominated. It's all engineers and developers and IT people. She's like really minority among these men. Not only she's from another country, she's an immigrant, she's also a woman, so she's really a minority when it comes to her workplace. And they asked her, well, sounds like you have been on so many sick leave and you're busy with your child, and you're not able to take a lot of projects in, so we suggest that you either come back to work 100% or consider getting another job. So it's like, okay, it's like building up problems right after this postpartum depression. Like it's not over. Like the minute you think it's over, something else comes in. And I know it's not easy to ask, but do you have any promotion, like future research, suggestion, health promotion strategies?
Absolutely.
Do you have any tips as a mother?
Yeah, I think what we've tapped on about the fact that it's this, that we are in this state of this kind of superficial connectedness, so we can text our friends and say, oh, I'm coming, and we can also cancel, from a distance. We can connect with family on Zoom and all of these kind of online tools, but we also are not able to see and are not surrounded by family in the way that I think we were for so long in human history. And so I think, what we've talked about the fact that everything is connected, one thing that I think for mothers we need to start doing is, I'm always surprised. I'm always there when a mother goes on leave, on maternity leave, and when she comes back, I'm always just like running around busily because I'm thinking, you've been away and now you have left your child at home. You're now trying to get back to work, but you're like split in your mind because you're also trying to think about, oh, how is that working?
And you also cannot catch up at work.
You can't catch up on work. You come back and you have this, it's almost like you started your work for the first time. And we know how overwhelming it is to start new in a workplace where you have this feeling of, I need to prove myself, I need to show that I'm worthy to be here. And imagine you're doing this while you're also still in the depths of all this hormonal changes, right? And it doesn't matter when you come back to work. Whenever you come back, and if you come back, that is the state that you're in. And I think one thing that we need to do is we need to start being better at preparing environments for people. So in Ugandan culture, if somebody comes to visit, it's so important that you greet them. It's this ceremony of saying, oh, welcome back. I'm so happy to have you here. This feeling that you get when you show up somewhere and somebody's expecting you. I think we need to start giving that to mothers and to people who come back to work. This feeling that I'm expecting you. I'm prepared for you to come here. I've thought about maybe what you would need in this circumstance. I think how we treat people in those first kind of weeks or what have you when you're coming back and feeling overwhelmed can be really impactful. We expect that you're going to be overwhelmed. We expect that the long amount of emails you have is going to make you feel like, what am I doing? That you're maybe going to be a bit weepy because you feel overwhelmed, and that we build security around that. Because I think we go around as if we're surprised. Oh, you're coming back to work. Oh, nice to see you. And business as usual. People can't go back to business as usual. It's a huge shift. I think, what you were saying about your friend really wishing that, she could be able to be there with her child and really experience and love that time. I think we've lost the kind of essence of bringing up children in some way because many of us are separate from our families and our communities, and maybe we're in a new country. And I think the family is the unit, and I think we need to make the unit a bit bigger. And so that, I think we need to bring back these days of, friends being family, but in a real substantial way where, I remember when I was on maternity leave and my friend, I had plenty of friends who said, oh, I'm here for you. If you need anything, just call me. And it was great. I loved it, but I didn't call. And then I had a friend who just showed up at the house with a plate of food and said, go for a walk, I'm hanging out with the kids. And for me, that was care. Because I think sometimes we tell people we're there. We need to show people we're there. We need to be active in that way. But just as I said, to be a partner and want to support your partner, but be struggling with your own mental health, I think we all need support, So I think we need to build this kind of sense of community, not only at home, but within our friendship circles, and definitely much more in our workplaces.
I have thinking about a very funny story of one of my friends giving birth. And she was just this lucky woman that had her mother visiting her from another country in Norway, and the mother knew she's going to give birth, so she was prepared there, standing there. So the partner, he went out the same night they had a baby because he was traumatized.
Okay.
So he needed a break.
Yeah.
Talking about support.
Starting
from family, yeah.
Oh my gosh. And I think even what is happening here, these conversations around also what, mental health problems are like and what they feel like can be helpful. So one thing I think about with, for example, depression, which is, really my area of interest, is that, when we are profoundly depressed, we also feel like a burden. It's like this, people tend to pull themselves away,
of course,
when they're depressed. They don't want to burden people who are around them. And sometimes people can do that even with someone, a partner or a friend who really wants to be there. You start to exclude yourself. You don't want to be the one who's sad in the corner at a party, so you just stay away. And I think for those people who are around somebody who is depressed, to understand that is their internal message, I think even being able to say, remind this person, I'm not here for you because you're a burden. You're not a burden to me. You're not it's not unpleasant to be around you. I want to be here because I care. It makes sense what you're feeling, but it's also not the truth. Like you feel like a burden. You're not a burden, you know? And I think as we start to be able to talk more openly about mental health, like we talk about a broken foot, you break your leg, everybody knows you broke your leg, and you'll say, yeah, I broke my leg, this is what's happening. But with mental health, we talk to the closest people about us, but we don't necessarily have yet the vocabulary to talk about that openly.
I mean, my personal experience when I was really depressed and low was still a taboo. Like, I work in a psychology department, and I couldn't just go around and say, I'm depressed. If I showed up, people were like, is it gone? Are you back to work?
Yeah.
No, I'm here because my GP makes me go to work once a week.
Yeah.
But then on the other hand, I have this friend where I'm really close to the daughter, and she was just like, because she's Russian, so she was there, and I couldn't decide.
Yeah.
She decides. And I remember once we were talking, and she was like, "It's not about you. It's about us. We want you.
Yeah.
You, my daughter. What should I tell my daughter? That you're bad? That you're depressed? I can't." So that's the type of, like, that's what I needed.
Yeah.
That was what I needed. Like, she didn't care. I'm okay. I'm not okay. Here's the ticket. We are going to go to Poland together, and we are going to, where are you? I'm going to Gothenburg. You're coming. You're taking the bus. You're coming to me. And I'm like, okay.
Oh.
I mean, I'm depressed. I won't be able to hang out with you. I won't be. No, you're coming. I don't care. You're coming.
Yeah, I love
that was
this.
What I needed. Like,
absolutely, I love this, and I think that touches on two things that are so important. I think one is like, what are our expectations of somebody who is depressed and what that looks like really need to be updated, because I think, we're walking around the world. Depression is one of the most common mental health problems.
It's going to be more.
And it's going to be, it's predicted in 2030 to be the leading cause of mental health problems, of mental health disability in workplaces and everything, of every single mental health and physical condition. It is profound. Like, we are in a time where we really, really need to do something. And I think one of the things is exactly what you said, that we assume that if somebody is depressed, then they must be looking like this, appearing like that, and, we will never see them. And if we see them, then they're not depressed. But I think, people mask what they're going through a lot. People try and, be a good sport. And people, I think, also are slightly uncomfortable with somebody suffering. And I think that's something also we need to work on. We just want people to feel better. We're like, okay, hurry up and get better. Oh, okay, it looks like you're better. Let's carry on. That helps nobody. I love this approach of your friend, which is like, come depressed.
Yeah.
Show up sad. Be in the corner. Doesn't matter. We just want you around. I think that's hugely helpful. That it's like, I don't need you to show up in a particular way. I'm happy to be around you in whatever state you're in. Go and sit with people and invite people in, however they can show up. I think that can really, really help. Yeah.
Amazing. I don't want to stop this chat. I'm enjoying this. But I want to have more of you in the future.
I'd love that. That would be
I have tons of questions that I should ask for my own sake. This is where I'm going to stop it here.
Amazing. Thank you.
And I'm very thankful that you were able to make it.
Oh, what a pleasure.
Yeah.
I mean, of course I come to speak with you, and this is all my most important stuff. So thank you for having me.
You're welcome. I'm very happy that I managed to host you, my first guest. But it's not going to be over with you. Episodes with you are going to be continued.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Thank you for today.
Thank you for today.
That was it. And as always, peace out. You should say peace out.
Peace out.